The anime opens with our MC, Gray, finally acquiring the title of Strongest King, having slain hundreds and massacred various nations to show off his dominance. But he was always on edge and very lonely at the top. One day, whilst admiring his achievements, Gray is suddenly assassinated, sent sinking into an abyss, only to be given a second chance at life. Being reborn before his new parents, Gray lays eyes on Alice Lewin and Reynold Lewin, sharing his mother's eyes, his father's hair, and bestowed the new name Arthur Lewin. Now in the body of a toddler, Arthur can't help but allow his new parents to take care of him, unable to control this new body of his. One day, Arthur witnesses his father Reynold empowering his fist with magic, only to shatter a boulder to impress Alice. When Reynold is injured from showing off, Alice showed that she was capable of healing magic, skills that never existed in Arthur's previous life. Heading into the nearby forest, Reynold dons his battle gear, only to enchant his body, allowing him to easily take down a bull attacking him. As Reynold heads home from his hunt, Arthur reasons he should learn more about this world as fast as possible, especially since people are allowed to own armor and weapons. Reynold admits he is quite beat up, seeing as it's been a while since he's gone hunting, but as Arthur admires his new comfy life, he remembers a time when people would attack him in his sleep, forcing Arthur to constantly stay on edge in his previous life. As some time passes by, we see Arthur able to crawl on his own, pleasing his parents as they watch Arthur adorably appear in front of a mirror. Being the first time he's seen his own reflection, Arthur admits he's still not used to his new life, but being placed asleep for his usual nap by Alice, Arthur waits until the coast is clear. Springing out of his crib, Arthur uses his bedding to slide onto the floor safely, quietly crawling past his mother, who is doing the dishes, only to enter the study room in his house. Taking out a book, Arthur gets to work learning about this new world, seeing as knowledge is power. Arthur reads that the continent where he resides is known as Dicathan and houses 3 kingdoms. First is the Darv Kingdom, the nation of dwarves that live underground. Next is the Elenwar Kingdom, home to elves that reside in the forest. Finally is the Sapin Kingdom, where humans live and is the most inhabited out of the 3 kingdoms. Arthur learns that the kingdom is also a monarchy like his previous world, but the throne seems to be inherited and not fought over, unlike in his previous life. Taking out another book, Arthur realizes his current world is quite undeveloped, reading that his current world runs on a power called magic, and magic uses mana to activate certain skills. Apparently, the ability to cast spells is hereditary, and only 1 in 100 people end up manifesting such powers that allow one to augment or conjure. Augmenting magic involves someone enhancing their body, ultimately boosting the caster's strength, defense, and agility, whereas conjuring magic is the projection of spells. Arthur does wonder what Alice's magic is, seeing as healing magic doesn't fit into either category. But Arthur hears that the key to controlling mana is dependent on one's mana core. Most spellcasters start casting spells from the start of puberty to their late teens, and it's the channeling of one's mana into their mana core that determines a mage's mastery over their magic. Arthur recognizes the concept to be similar to Ki, the power he used in his previous life to conjure internal power and manifest that internal power into external strength. Focusing in, Arthur begins searching for his mana core, preparing to pump it with mana. But suddenly Alice picks up Arthur, having been searching for him. Pausing, Alice suddenly notices something strange about Arthur. But upon further inspection, Alice realizes Arthur needs his nappy changed. Although Arthur is embarrassed, he states he'll continue to work hard. Moving forward in time 2 years, where we see Alice detailing Arthur's upbringing. Alice writes that Arthur is definitely a curious child, having never seen Arthur smile once since he was born. But as Alice glances outside, she sees Reynold teaching Arthur how to swing a sword. Instantly, Alice confronts Reynold, demanding to know why their 2-year-old child is practicing sword swings. But Arthur notes down that Alice is far scarier than Reynold himself. Taking Arthur into town, Alice notices Arthur enjoying walking around. But Arthur states he can use the time to visit stores and learn more about their nation's technology. Stopping in front of a store filled with crystals, Arthur watches the store clerk show off some fire magic. Cutting to later that evening, where Alice carries the sleepy Arthur home. Arthur is grateful that his parents are taking care of his every need, having never felt such warmth before, especially since Arthur was an orphan in his previous life, yearning to be part of a family like other kids his age. As Alice puts Arthur to sleep, she reveals that she knows Arthur frequently slips out of bed to read. Happy to see that Arthur gets his curiosity from Reynold, but Alice wishes that Arthur would enjoy his youth whilst he still can. With some more time passing, Arthur watches over his dad channeling mana into his core, only to upheave several stones. Although the spell wasn't the most impressive, Alice asks Arthur to continue watching, amazing Arthur when Reynold fires off a torrential punch followed by an earth-shaking axe kick. Seeing as his father is an augmenter, Arthur is suddenly whisked away by Alice, who says it's time for Arthur to have his nap, but Arthur wants to read instead. Putting on his puppy dog eyes, Arthur manages to charm his mother into giving him some time to read, choosing to spend the time perfecting his mana core as Arthur continues to compress mana towards his core. As Alice brings some refreshments for Reynold, they suddenly hear a massive explosion go off in the house, forcing Reynold to tackle Alice's side, protecting Alice from the explosion. Alice cries that Arthur is still in the house, prompting them both to rush into the house, only to be shocked to see Arthur floating in the air. Reynold states that Arthur had created his mana core before he was even 3 years old, but as Arthur proudly faces his parents, he suddenly spots planks of wood falling towards him. With Arthur attempting to leap out of the way, he's suddenly protected by his parents, who leap in front of the falling wood, surprising Arthur as he suddenly sees Alice and Reynold breaking into tears, both relieved that their baby boy is safe. Flashing back, Arthur remembers a time when he had humiliated his opponent in battle, but strangely enough, his opponent's parents still consoled their son. In the present, Arthur begins to feel an emotion he's never felt before, suddenly crying, as well as he wonders how much he's changed since living this new life. Flashing back, we see Arthur in his previous life, confronting a captured emissary for attempting to assassinate Arthur. Having failed, Arthur's council had declared that the emissary and his family will be banished and will all be punished. But out of nowhere, the emissary's wife and child called out to him. Seeing his loved ones present, the emissary had begged Arthur to spare his family and only punish him. But as the emissary pleads to Arthur, Arthur swiftly slays the emissary's wife and child, something Arthur considered quite reasonable, as he had spared the wife and child from future torture, unlike the traitorous emissary. In the present, we see Reynold asking Arthur if he would like to use the same gear as him, but Arthur is more interested in using a wooden sword to train. As Reynold agrees to spar Arthur with a wooden sword, Arthur rushes his father, both exchanging equal blows, but suddenly Arthur notices Reynold igniting his blade with magic. With a single glance, Arthur mimics the technique, this time slowly pushing Reynold back as the duel ends with Arthur's victory, having decimated Reynold's blade only to grin from ear to ear at his accomplishment. Entering the house, Arthur hears Reynold suggesting to Alice that they get Arthur a teacher, seeing as Arthur is clearly a gifted child, but Alice states that she can teach Arthur magic. Sadly, Reynold says Alice's magic is unconventional. Plus, Reynold points out that Arthur at the age of 4 was able to cut through his reinforced blade like it was nothing. Although Alice is amazed at his son's power, she still refuses to allow Arthur to be sent away, infuriating Reynold. Reynold states that Arthur can truly grow up to be someone amazing if his talents were honed, but Alice stands firm, stating that their little boy shouldn't leave their parents' side at such a young age. As a compromise, Arthur suggests that they all move together instead of Arthur leaving alone, something that excites Reynold and Alice as they immediately begin to pack, excited for the journey ahead. The next day, 2 carriages arrive in front of the home, people Arthur knows as Reynolds and Alice's former party, the Twin Horn Party. Apparently, they helped rebuild the house when Arthur had first awakened his core, greeting Adam Crinch, only to be pulled in for a tight hug by Angela Rose. Luckily, Durden Walker saves Arthur from being suffocated by melons, only to spot Jasmine Flamesworth glaring at him from above a carriage. Finally, Helen Shard welcomes Arthur, all boarding the carriages only to immediately head out. seeing the carriages being pulled along by monsters. Arthur notes how primitive the transportation are, a stark difference from the floating vehicles in his old world. Regardless, the gang take a break in a forest, having set their destination to be the city of Xyrus. But as the party sit by a fire to relax, they suddenly spot monsters approaching their camp. In an instant, the party ready their weapons, all watching as the monsters pounce onto Jasmine. In mere moments, Jasmine spearheads the counterattack by carving through the monsters, only for Adam and Reynold to back her up, leaving Helen to snipe them from afar with her bow. Arthur notes how Jasmine, Adam, Reynold, and Helen are all augmenters, but Durden and Angela are conjurers, having assisted with spells, something that inspires Arthur to grow stronger. As night falls, the gang feast on the monster corpses, all stuffing themselves full only for Alice to notice Reynold is still injured. Interestingly enough, the party chooses to stand guard, all whilst Alice begins healing Reynold. But Arthur hears that Alice is considered an emitter mage with healing magic. Apparently, emitters with healing magic are very rare, explaining why the party members are very protective of Alice. Plus, it explains why Alice and Reynold were living in the countryside where not many people could uncover and target Alice for her powers. With Alice finishing up patching up Reynold, Adam asks for permission to spar Arthur for a bit, all watching as Adam retrieves his wrapped spear, exciting the onlookers. Arthur wonders how he'll compare to a trained fighter like Adam, but as the duel starts, both Adam and Arthur ignite their weapons. But surprisingly, Arthur chooses to physically enhance his legs as well. Rushing Adam, Arthur appears in front of Adam, but before Adam can react, Arthur blinks behind Adam, accidentally slipping as he's not used to his body. When Adam turns to clash weapons with Arthur, Adam's strength blows Arthur back and knocks his blade out of his hand, but luckily Angela steps in to catch Arthur from falling, ending the duel in Adam's favor. The gang all scold Adam for attacking Arthur with his full strength, but Adam states he was frightened at Arthur's monstrous speed. As Arthur catches his breath, he suddenly notices Jasmine has snuck up on him, asking to know how Arthur reinforced his feet and enchanted his blade at the same time. Seeing as Jasmine won't back down, we cut forward in time where the gang are proceeding as planned, all making sure to stop for breaks, where we see Adam giving Arthur pointers on how to fight. As for the others, Reynold is seen doing push-ups with Arthur, only for Helen to give Arthur private lessons on how to fire a bow. Finally, Jasmine is seen racing Arthur to test their speeds. That night, Arthur is seen reading a book, but gets weirded out seeing Jasmine watching him. As time passes by, Arthur notes how caring Jasmine has been towards him, even giving Arthur a birthday present as a thanks for all Arthur has taught her. Jasmine begins explaining the gift to House, not only a rope but doubles up as a blade, something the other girls find adorable seeing as Jasmine is normally closed off to others. But as the gang prepare to continue their journey, Arthur suddenly spots Alice acting strange, worried seeing as Alice utters it's nothing. As the gang ride their carriages through some mountainous terrain, their carriages are suddenly halted by some bandits. With several arrows stopping their escape, Adam and Durden rush to scout the area, but they realize they're completely surrounded. The leader of the bandits orders for the capture of Alice and Arthur, but the others can be slaughtered, something that disgusts Arthur. As the bandits start their attack, we see several men sliding down from the mountain, only to be met by a massive fireball from Durden that stalls the attackers. Next, Reynold tries carving through as many bandits as possible, but fails to spot an attacker sneaking up from behind. Luckily, Helen snipes the attacker, prompting Adam and Jasmine to assist with the defenses, but Arthur is worried that the party will burn out soon. With some time passing by, we see the bandits continue to swarm the carriages, exhausting the gang as they're clearly growing fatigued. When Reynold is tossed into a carriage, Arthur and Alice rush to check on him, but Reynold cries that he is fine and that Alice should keep her healing magic concealed. Reynold orders Arthur to drag Alice away from their location, but Arthur states he wants to stay and fight, but suddenly Reynold reveals that Alice is currently carrying another child. Arthur realizes that Alice's strange behavior in the past few days was because she was pregnant, something that finally convinces him to drag Alice to safety, all whilst Reynold keeps the leader of the bandits occupied. As Arthur runs into some bandits blocking his path, he is grateful for the party members clearing a path for him and Alice, finding it ironic how he has slain so many innocents in his past life, yet right now, he is begging for his own family to be spared. Right on cue, a bandit atop the mountains is seen casting a wind spell to knock out our duo, but having detected the spell, Arthur decides to shove Alice away from the blast zone, tanking the blast himself. With Arthur being flung off the mountain into the forest below, Arthur uses the rope and his dagger to snatch the mage and drag him down as well, watching as Angela and Durden attempt to rescue Arthur with their magic, but no luck. Arthur says he strangely feels fulfilled, finally realizing why someone would go so far to save a loved one. But sadly, Arthur's one regret is how he won't get to experience what it's like to be a big brother. Deep in the forest below the mountain, we see Arthur awaken in a mist-filled terrain, surprised he had survived, but horrifically Arthur is greeted by a disturbing monster. Having moved over into a cave, Arthur and the creature stare at each other. But as Arthur rushes to attack the monster, it waves off Arthur's attacks. The monster says it isn't here to hurt Arthur, surprising Arthur seeing as it knows his name. But out of nowhere, the monster heads over to some fruits growing in the cave, carefully plucking them for Arthur to eat. Arthur is confused at what is happening, but having survived the fall barely, Arthur's wounds finally catch up to him and he begins to bawl crying. The monster orders Arthur to eat and recover, something Arthur happily does as the monster watches Arthur adorably stuff his face, promising to answer any questions afterwards. Arthur starts by asking if the monster knows how his parents are doing, prompting the monster to reveal that they're locked in place. But using a magic spell, the monster shows the aftermath of the bandits' attack, happy to report that the Twin Horn party had successfully fended off the attackers, and it's been several days since they left the scene. Hearing the good news, Arthur can't help but shed tears of joy, hearing that the monster before him is called Sylvia. Cutting elsewhere, we see two mysterious figures speaking to each other near a blue lake, only to cut back to Arthur, who continues to recover in the cave alongside Sylvia, lovingly feeding and watching over Arthur as he sleeps. Although Arthur is recovering as the time passes, Arthur had heard from Sylvia that they're currently located on the edge of the Elshire Forest, where dangerous animals and outlaws roam the land. Sylvia does offer to create a breach in space to help Arthur bypass the danger. Happy to see Arthur is now able to move and fight, but Arthur does wonder why Sylvia is taking care of him in the first place, wondering what object Sylvia is protecting and whether or not Sylvia is injured. As Arthur continues to train, he takes some time to further develop his mana core, impressing Sylvia as she shows off a spell. Arthur immediately notices Sylvia creating a ball of energy while simultaneously gathering mana from the air to fuel it, a technique Arthur never knew was possible. Sylvia utters that humans tend to separate the use of gathering and using mana from magic, something magical beasts normally combine. Sylvia offers to teach Arthur how to use the same technique she just showed off, piquing Arthur's interest, but Sylvia states that such a technique will be guaranteed to make Arthur stronger, demanding to know what Arthur intends to do with such power. Thinking about his loved ones getting hurt, Arthur declares he'll use his power to slay those who oppose him. But instantly Sylvia flicks Arthur away. Sylvia says Arthur gave her the wrong answer, plus his twisted face disgusts her. But Arthur is confused since in his previous life, he became the strongest king by obtaining unrivaled power. Sylvia apologizes for hitting Arthur, but upon touching Arthur with one of her fingers, Sylvia reminds Arthur she could easily shred Arthur in an instant. Arthur admits she prefers the more gentle Sylvia, only to hear that rage and anger burns easily, and when someone acts out violence, they feel good in the moment. But this only breeds more hatred and violence. Sylvia asks Arthur not to waste away his new life, making Arthur wonder if she knows about his past life. But as Sylvia asks Arthur once more what he'll do with his new profound power, Arthur correctly answers he'll protect his loved ones with it. With Sylvia satisfied, we cut elsewhere where we see a monster tracking down Sylvia's whereabouts, having slaughtered all who got in its way. Flashing back, we see Arthur in his previous life waking up, only to be greeted by his servants who divert their eyes in fear of Arthur's presence. As Arthur admires his self-portrait, he states that a king is meant to start wars and gather glory for his nation, something his advisor Marlon agrees with. In the present, Arthur begins to control his ability to absorb mana whilst using it, focusing in carefully all while Sylvia watches over him. Arthur utters that in his past life, he had been blessed with immense power in the form of his key control, and his powers allowed him to defeat all who opposed him. Having calmed himself, Arthur manages to find the perfect balance between the opposing techniques, perfectly controlling his input and output, only to excitedly test out his new body. As Arthur runs over to show Sylvia, Sylvia suddenly smacks Arthur aside, asking Arthur to keep quiet and hide. From the darkness, the monster tracking Sylvia appears in the cave, confusing Arthur as the creature looks exactly like Sylvia. The monster says it found Sylvia by following her blood trail, demanding that Sylvia come with it. But when Sylvia refuses, the monster fires off a dark projectile that Sylvia is barely able to block. Falling to her knees, Sylvia is clearly very weak, reminded by the monster that she has little time to live. Before Arthur can intervene, Sylvia reassures Arthur she is fine, making use of the remainder of her life force to transform into a pure white dragon. As Sylvia fires off a beam attack, the monster swiftly defends, retaliating with several projectiles of its own, ultimately massacring the surrounding cave. But Sylvia is more focused on ensuring Arthur is not hurt. Seeing the monster charging up a devastating attack, Sylvia has no choice but to activate her trump card, suddenly freezing time before the monster's attack can reach her. With only Sylvia and Arthur unaffected, Sylvia reveals her draconic status to Arthur, quickly opening up a rift in space to help Arthur escape. Sylvia confirms that Arthur will use his newfound powers to protect the weak, but Arthur can't help but notice Sylvia all bloodied from her battle. Depressed, he is powerless to help her. Sylvia does choose to give Arthur some parting gifts, starting off by handing an egg wrapped in her feather, asking Arthur to take good care of it. Next, Sylvia marks Arthur with some strange symbols that run up both of his arms, stating that everything will make sense in due time. Seeing as it's time to say goodbye, Sylvia apologizes, seeing as she could have sent Arthur away from the very beginning. But Sylvia wanted to spend time with Arthur and watch him grow, something that makes Arthur tremble seeing as he can't protect Sylvia. Sylvia says this departure was destined to happen, prompting Arthur to cry out that he considers Sylvia his family, just like a grandmother figure, something that hits deep with Sylvia. Unable to hold open the rift any longer, Sylvia nudges Arthur through the portal. But before Arthur can change his mind, Sylvia closes the gate to ensure Arthur is safe. Now alone with the creature, Sylvia unfreezes time, allowing the devastating attack to land, sending her to the ground. The monster states that the attack shouldn't be lethal, heading over to inspect Sylvia's body. But out of nowhere, Sylvia unleashes another point-blank beam attack that manages to eradicate the surrounding area. Back with Arthur, he's seen traveling through a strange space, reminded by Sylvia's voice to live a fulfilling life and not stray down a hatred-filled path like in his previous life, something that catches Arthur off guard. Hearing Sylvia address him by his former title of King Grey, we cut forward in time where Arthur has successfully escaped the cave, swearing to uphold his promises to Sylvia, but suddenly Arthur detects a presence nearby. Immediately enchanting his legs, Arthur leaps into the trees to get a better view of the people nearby, all whilst remembering to care for his egg. Having made it to the source of the sound, Arthur notices a carriage of bandits restraining an elf girl, watching as the men plan on selling the elf as a slave to earn a fortune. Seeing the men treating the elf so poorly, Arthur grows infuriated, remembering Sylvia's words to protect the weak whilst never resorting to unnecessary violence. Acting smart, Arthur follows after the carriage as it makes its way through the forest, but seeing as the sun has begun to set, the men choose to set up camp and rest for the day. Arthur wonders if the men will give him intel on the nearest human settlement, overhearing the four men discussing the horrific acts they may do to the elf girl. But calming his anger, Arthur chooses to wait a little longer. With the moon finally rising, Arthur wonders why the forest hounds are obeying the men, realizing that the magic collars must be controlling them. Arthur starts by tossing some acorns at the forest hounds, causing the beast to cry out, but this forces one of the four men to hurry and shush the hounds, fearing their howls will attract other magic beasts. Seeing the man distracted, Arthur equips a magic dagger, instantly appearing behind the man only to silence him. Borrowing the man's blade, Arthur hears a second man approaching, swiftly dispatching him with a neck slice. Seeing as the third man has arrived as well, Arthur makes quick work of him by slashing at his legs. But before he can finish the man off, the fourth man appears, excited to have encountered another mage. The fourth man starts off by empowering his fist, catching Arthur's attention as the man blitzes towards him, smashing the ground beneath Arthur. Although Arthur was able to dodge, Arthur fails to land a single strike on the man, attempting to catch him off guard by tossing out his dagger whilst holding onto the string built into it. But the man easily catches the dagger. Pumped up, the man rushes Arthur with his own dagger, mixing things up by kicking Arthur to surprise him. Seeing Arthur battered up, the man picks Arthur up to inspect his worth, but Arthur takes the chance to set the man's leg on fire. Pissed, the man states he'll simply sell Arthur's corpse, but having been distracted, Arthur manages to retrieve his dagger only to plunge it deep into the fourth man's skull. With only the third man remaining, Arthur ignores his pleas to be spared, wrapping up his fourth kill only to head towards the captured elf. Arthur notices something familiar about the elf girl before him, but having set her free, Arthur takes her outside, telling her she can go home now. The elf girl is worried about Arthur's wounds, but this reminds Arthur that he has never hung out with another kid his age, quickly covering up the corpses of the men as he reasons kids shouldn't be seeing such things. Arthur reassures the elf girl that she is free to go, but before Arthur can leave with the loot he's obtained, the elf grabs a hold of Arthur, unable to tell him she is scared. Arthur utters that he needs to get back to his family, only to hear that the elf before him needs help getting back home, having gotten lost whilst hunting for bugs. Remembering his past life of being isolated and alone as a kid, Arthur agrees to help the elf, but the elf cries they should free the hounds before they leave. Arthur fears that the hounds will go wild once set free, but the elf reassures Arthur that magic beasts are an elf's best friend, pleasantly surprising Arthur when he sees the hounds peacefully leave once set free. Starting their journey together, Arthur learns the elf's name to be Tesha Aerolith, both choosing to take breaks occasionally only for Arthur to feed Tesha to ensure she isn't hungry. Tesha is a little disgusted at the meat soup Arthur made, but Tesha asks why Arthur is currently in the Elshire Forest. Arthur reveals he was separated from his parents, hearing that in Elenoir, the land of the elves, Tesha's parents are normally busy, so Tesha spends time mainly with her grandparents and caretakers. With the journey being longer than expected, Arthur notices some bugs floating around Tesha, hearing that the bugs are what elves use to help mark paths in Elenoir. As the two continue on their path, Tesha says she'll start training with her assigned master once her mana awakens, surprising Arthur as there doesn't seem to be a school system Tesha has to take. Along their path, Arthur takes note of a strange forest hound following them. But as our duo set up camp for the night, they suddenly hear a hound cry throughout the forest. Arthur tells Tesha to rest whilst he stands guard, taking the time alone to inspect the egg Sylvia had given him. Just then, Tesha offers to share her tent with Arthur, but Arthur reassures Tesha he isn't tired, ultimately giving in as Tesha is afraid to be all alone in the tent. As Arthur sits guard, Tesha prepares to sleep, but she takes the chance to call Arthur a pervert, having heard stories of humans with multiple wives. Arthur cries that only aristocrats and nobles would have multiple wives, finally shutting Tesha up as she collapses from exhaustion. With our duo both falling asleep, they awaken the next day, climbing up a waterfall only to help each other pass a lake. Arthur says he still wants to reunite with his family quickly, but out of nowhere Arthur's mana core begins to pulsate, causing immense pain to Arthur. Unable to move, Arthur rests whilst Tesha searches for some herbs, but surprisingly one of the forest hounds they saved has brought a boar to repay Arthur for setting them free. That night, our duo feast on the delectable boar meat, prompting Tesha to feed Arthur some mushrooms she's picked, but this only gives Arthur another stomachache. Settling in for the night, Arthur fights to stay awake, all whilst Tesha recounts tales she heard about humans and dwarves. But as Arthur has fallen asleep first, Tesha heads to bed as well. The next day, Arthur continues to suppress his pain, reassuring Tesha that they've almost arrived in her homeland. But Tesha asks if she can call Arthur Art, especially since they've grown quite close. Since they're friends, Arthur takes the chance to tease Tesha, but noticing a spark in a nearby tree, Arthur realizes they've reached Tesha's home. As our duo head through the tree's gate, they're suddenly teleported to a different location, but out of nowhere, several elven warriors surround Arthur and restrain him, all whilst Tesha watches on. As the guards pin Arthur to the floor, they accuse Arthur of following and taking advantage of Tesha to infiltrate their home. But as Arthur looks to Tesha to clear things up, she coldly glares at him. Arthur realizes he should have never trusted others, wondering if Tesha's innocent girl act was all a ploy to use him, remembering back when he had to slay those closest to him to survive. When the elven guards order for Arthur to be put down, Tesha comes to her senses, rushing to ask the guards to let Arthur go. Seeing Tesha infatuated by Arthur, the guards grow more infuriated at Arthur, but suddenly a voice calls for the guards to stand down. With a green light appearing out of nowhere, an elder-looking elf appears, demanding the guards stand down, allowing Tesha to apologize to Arthur for his brutal treatment. Tesha reveals that the elder before them is her grandpa, the former ruler of the Elenwar kingdom, Virion Aerolith. Virion personally thanks Arthur for returning Tesha to their home, especially since Tesha is the princess of Elenier, something Arthur could have never imagined. Tesha apologizes since she didn't tell Arthur her true status, but suddenly Tesha's parents, King Alduin and Queen Muriel appear, glad Tesha is safe. Alduin demands to know why there is a filthy human in the kingdom, ordering for Arthur to be arrested, but Virion and Tesha vouch for Arthur, stating that he should be rewarded since he rescued a princess. As Tesha prepares to take Arthur to their castle, Virion whispers he'll have a chat with Arthur later, but Arthur can't help but detect Virion's overwhelming aura. Tesha begins escorting Arthur through town, amazing Arthur as he sees various homes plastered amongst the surrounding trees, but sadly a crowd has formed, all glaring at the human boy. Arthur utters that in the past elves and humans weren't the fondest of each other, something that shows as there is clear prejudice against him. But Arthur wonders why Tesha is so accepting of him. Arthur still can't shake off that glare from earlier Tesha gave him, but at the same time Arthur still feels his core throbbing in pain, declaring he'll hold out until everything is over. Having arrived at Tesha's massive mansion, Tesha greets her maids asking that Arthur be treated kindly during his stay, but seeing as the mood is quite sour, Arthur asks if he can explain how they got here. As Tesha and her family gather, Arthur prepares to recount his tales while standing, but Arthur is suddenly asked to sit with everyone, ultimately served some snacks and tea, as asked by Tesha herself. Finally getting down to business, Alduin introduces himself along with Muriel his wife and Virion the former king, prompting Arthur to humbly utter he is from a small town in the Sapin kingdom, remembering to be respectful since he is technically standing before royalty. Alduin is impressed by Arthur's mature attitude, agreeing to listen to how Arthur was separated from his family, choosing to leave out parts regarding Sylvia, only to explain his encounter with the men who attacked Tesha. Immediately, Alduin gets pissed hearing that human traffickers tried capturing his daughter, but Virion is more curious as to how Arthur freed Tesha. Arthur states he simply defeated the traffickers with his magecraft, something that piques Alduin's interest, but the guards nearby refuse to believe a mere child defeated adults, accusing Arthur of lying once more to infiltrate their kingdom. Virion warns his men to back off, followed by Tesha crying that Arthur is telling the truth, but luckily Muriel embraces Tesha, lightening up the mood. Alduin says he believes Arthur, prompting Arthur to ask for his freedom as he needs help reuniting with his family. King Alduin is opposed to helping a human, but Arthur states that not all humans are as terrible as Alduin thinks, something Virion agrees with. Seeing Alduin still stubborn, Tesha gives her father a mean stare, leading Alduin to explain that the teleportation gate to the Sapping Kingdom is only accessible to the Council of 3 races and is opened every 7 years. As for when the portal will next open, Alduin says it'll take another 5 years, but seeing Arthur distraught, Alduin agrees to have his soldiers escort Arthur home through other means. As Alduin offers Arthur a place to stay for the night, Virion takes note of Arthur's strange attitude, cutting to later that night where Arthur cleans up, all whilst wondering whether this pain in his chest has to do with Sylvia. Heading onto the balcony, Arthur notices Tesha happily reunited with her family, suddenly yearning to reunite with his parents as he wishes they escaped safely. With Arthur choosing to go on a nightly walk, Tesha suddenly catches up to him, apologizing for her father's horrible attitude towards him. But Arthur says it only makes sense since they were worried about Tesha. Arthur asks Tesha if he is worthy of reuniting with his parents, especially since the bandits attacked his family because of him, plus he wasn't able to protect his parents himself. Annoyed, Tesha cries that it's common sense that parents would miss their child, plus Tesha herself admits to missing Arthur once he leaves. Out of nowhere, specks of light fill their surroundings, a feature of fireflies swarming them having been drawn to the surrounding flowers. Seeing Tesha so innocent, Arthur blames his corrupt mind for thinking so badly of the people around him, apologizing to Tesha as he promises to do better moving forward. At that moment, Arthur detects a projectile being launched towards them, blocking the attack only to swiftly enchant his legs as he rushes to kick the attacker. But surprisingly, it's Virion himself. Arthur demands to know why he was being attacked, but Virion utters the projectile was only an optical illusion, declaring that Arthur truly is a capable fighter and his story now makes more sense. Before Tesha can scold her grandpa, Virion says he is quite interested in Arthur's skills, choosing to move Tesha aside as he tosses Arthur a wooden sword. Understanding the situation, Arthur bolts towards Virion, keeping his movements short and concise. But Virion manages to evade each of Arthur's slashes, even after he's enchanted his movements. Choosing to speed up, Arthur's blade clashes with Virion's palm, suddenly shattering the wooden sword as a fragment flies towards Tesha. Reacting fast enough, Arthur throws the remainder of his sword to deflect the projectile, only to resume their fight as both Arthur and Virion both ignite their fist, suddenly clashing with raw strength. Arthur is reminded of clashing with a powerful beast in his past, but as Arthur is blown back by Virion's sheer strength, he quickly recovers, only to rush towards Virion once more, managing to tag Virion's forehead. Virion is amazed Arthur won their duel, but before Virion can announce their second round, Tesha cries for Virion to stop, prompting Virion to offer Arthur to be his apprentice. Arthur states that he can't since he still needs to reunite with his parents. But Virion wonders if Arthur will accept his proposal if his parents know Arthur is fine and well. Before Arthur can ask more, he suddenly collapses onto his knees, clenching onto his chest. Virion says he had suspected Arthur is in possession of a beast will, and only Virion himself can help Arthur from dying, but only if Arthur becomes his apprentice. Having sunken into a dark abyss, Arthur suddenly feels a pain rupture from his chest only to give rise to a dark entity Arthur fears is his traumas. But before Arthur can be consumed by his dark thoughts, he is awoken by Tesha. Arthur is relieved it was only a nightmare, annoying Tesha as she says Virion is waiting for Arthur, but rolling out of bed Arthur begins to get changed. Tesha hears that Arthur may be staying with them for a little while longer, but Arthur teases Tesha by calling her princess, asking her to leave so he can change. As the duo head outside, they notice Alduin and Muriel, reminding Virion that humans aren't allowed to live amongst elves as it goes against tradition. But Virion says he's taken a liking to Arthur. As Virion boards a carriage, Tesha tries arguing with her father, but Virion hurries our duo into the carriage as well, all traveling off to visit a friend of Virion's. Viren is amused seeing as Arthur has begun to call him Gramps, but seeing as Tesha has fallen asleep, Virion reveals that Tesha had intentionally woken up early to follow Arthur. Viren feels sorry for Tesha, seeing as she is the sole heir to the throne and hence has been quite lonely. Plus, in the past, many of her so-called friends had left her, meaning she doesn't open up as much anymore. Virion says he has seen Tesha smiling more often when she is around Arthur, personally thanking Arthur for being Tesha's first true friend. Something that surprises Arthur, as a powerful man like Virion is thanking a mere child like himself. Having traveled for a while, the trio stop, intriguing Arthur to who Virion's mysterious friend is, but out of nowhere Virion kicks on his friend's house, crying for them to come out. As a few seconds pass by, an older woman opens the doors, demanding that Virion not be so loud, only to be introduced as Renia Darkassa, a unique sorcerer. Arthur wonders if Renia has unique magic like his mother's healing magic, immediately entering Renia's home as Arthur takes note of the abundance of books in Renia's home. Arthur wonders how Renia can help him, sitting down only to learn that Renia is a diviner, a person that can see the past and future. Renia knows that Arthur isn't here to have his fortune read, amused that Arthur only wants to make contact with his parents. Seeing such childish innocence in Arthur, Renia asks Arthur to lean into a bucket of water, asking Arthur to picture his parents as she casts a spell over him. Arthur starts off by picturing his mother and father at a table, both sitting down to enjoy some stew, both getting depressed as stew was Arthur's favorite food, and it's supposed to be Arthur's birthday today. Apparently, after the bandits were defeated, the Twin Horn Party had no choice but to stop Reynold and Alice from chasing after Arthur, forced to board their carriage and continue on their journey. Not long after, Reynold and Alice separated from the others, only to acquire a home with their status where they await their next child's birth. Before his parents can break into tears, Arthur begins speaking to them with Renia's help, reassuring his parents that he'll return home once his body is treated, plus the elves in the Elenoir Kingdom are treating him well. Since Virion fulfilled his end of the bargain, Arthur declares he'll be Virion's apprentice moving forward. But as they all head home, Alduin still questions if a human boy should be amongst elves. Tesha says it wouldn't look good for her savior to be shooed away. Plus, Virion himself says he'll take responsibility for anything that happens moving forwards. Having finally changed their minds, both Alduin and Muriel accept Arthur as a friend, something Arthur realizes is thanks to both Tesha and Virion's convincing. To celebrate, Tesha takes Arthur into town, impressing Arthur as it is his first time seeing elven vendors. As Tesha drags Arthur toward the sweet stand, Arthur accidentally bumps into an elven kid. But when he turns to apologize, the elven kid along with their friends begin mocking Arthur for being a human. Arthur is not fazed at all by the kid's insults. Noticing Ferith Ivsar II attempting to escort Tesha away from him, Arthur begins to scheme, first intentionally calling Ferith by the wrong name. With Ferith now agitated, Arthur excuses himself from the situation, something Tesha praises Arthur for doing, but refusing to be embarrassed, Ferith challenges Arthur to a duel. Tesha reminds Ferith that a duel isn't something to be taken so lightly, but Ferith says he is simply defending his honor, something that confuses Arthur as he wonders what is so important about a duel. Seeing as a crowd has formed, Arthur has no choice but to accept, leaving Tesha to officiate the duel. With both challengers ready, Tesha starts the duel, prompting Ferith to rush Arthur with a punch, but sadly Arthur fires off a punch faster, knocking Ferith to the ground and ending the duel. Seeing as things have been settled, our duo continue enjoying their free time, munching on some snacks, spending time reading only to shop around. As our duo admire the scenery for a bit, Tesha asks what's on Arthur's mind, but Arthur says it's nothing. Tesha asks if Arthur is ready for his training with Virion tomorrow, reminding Arthur of Virion's warning. As Beast Tamers is a role Arthur should be cautious of trying to obtain. Virion had asked Arthur to focus and survive for as long as he can. That way he can reunite with his family, something that excites Arthur as he can finally get stronger for his family, inspiring Tesha to get stronger as well. With the big day arriving, we see Arthur and Virion begin his brutal training. But as we flash forward 3 years into the future, we see an older-looking Tesha waking up Arthur, even forced to use some mana when Arthur refuses to leave his bed. Waking up like normal, Both Tesha and Arthur spot the king and queen heading out for a meeting of sorts, but Tesha takes the chance to remind Arthur to eat his breakfast. Beginning training, both Arthur and Tesha spar each other with martial arts. But seeing as the duo have warmed up, Virion tosses them a wooden sword each. Brawling for a while, our duo take a break all whilst Virion goes over the sorcery Arthur will need to know once he's stabilized his mana core and awakened to one of the 4 elements, these being fire, water, wind, and earth. Virion points out that elves are more likely to awaken with wind, water, and earth magic. Dwarves favor earth and fire whilst humans are capable of mastering all 4. Sadly, since humans are limited by their mortal body, one element is most common whilst multiple being an extremely rare case. Tesha butts in asking why Arthur hasn't been using magic whilst training like her, but Virion says Arthur is currently handicapped and his mana core is currently housing a beast will that is the reason for his pain. Arthur suspects this beast will to be due to Sylvia's work, but Virion explains that Arthur needed to assimilate and hone his body before he can start using magic. Apparently awakening one's mana at 10 is impressive. As for Tesha herself, she gained her powers at 9 and ever since has been sparring Arthur with her enhanced attacks. Seeing as Arthur is finally ready, Virion declares it's time to awaken the beast within Arthur and set him free from the pain that's been plaguing him. As they gather around Arthur, Virion starts off by igniting his palm, declaring that they'll heat up Arthur's core first. As Virion strikes Arthur's chest with his palm, a surge of power begins to flow through Arthur, briefly revealing a strange marking that erupts from Arthur's chest. With the surroundings all being blown back, Virion is horrified to have discovered something, watching as Arthur suddenly faints. Rushing Arthur back home, Virion sits by Arthur's side until he awakens, asking Arthur if there is any information regarding his beast while he is hiding. Arthur chooses to reveal that he had come into contact with a dragon in the past, something Virion had suspected, as he demands Arthur never utter such a secret to others as it may harm Arthur. Arthur is glad Virion cares for him so much, but Virion brings up the fact that Arthur will be returning home in 4 months, surprising Arthur. Virion says there will be a cultural exchange between the 3 kingdoms, allowing the entrance to Xyrus City to be open, and Arthur can finally return to his family. Arthur realizes the king and queen's meeting this morning was to discuss the cultural event, but seeing Arthur's worried expression, Virion asks Arthur to rest for now and that Tesha has already been told about Arthur's new departure date. At night, Arthur can't help but think about how little time he has left before he has to leave, only to suddenly notice the egg Sylvia gave him begin to glow and crackle, followed by an eye poking out of one of the cracks. As a tiny black creature emerges from the egg, it adorably collapses beside Arthur, something Arthur finds cute. Picking up and inspecting the creature, the tiny dragon begins imitating Arthur's head tilts, only to suddenly bite down onto Arthur's arm, ingraining a spell into Arthur. Out of nowhere, Arthur begins to hear some strange sounds, realizing that his marking must be allowing him to communicate with the baby dragon. Seeing as he needs to name his new pet, Arthur decides to give the dragon the name of Sylvie based on its mother Sylvia. But seeing as his 8-year-old body is still in need of rest after such a hectic day, both Arthur and Sylvie knock out for the night. The next morning, Tesha wakes up early to get Arthur out of bed, but upon ripping away Arthur's bed sheets, she uncovers the adorable baby dragon sleeping beside Arthur. Tesha immediately takes a liking to Sylvie, but as the trio head through the forest, Sylvie is clearly frightened by the attention Tesha is giving it. Arthur shows off his new pet to Virion, something that almost gives Virion a heart attack, but Virion reasons that Sylvie spawning is most likely due to Arthur fully assimilating with his beast will. Arthur is worried that Sylvie's identity as a dragon will be discovered, but Virion reassures Arthur that he could simply say Sylvie is a rare mana beast to protect her identity. Moving on to his training, Virion says Arthur needs to learn how to control both his beast core and mana core simultaneously, something that intrigues Arthur. Virion begins by infusing his body with mana, suddenly allowing his wind magic to consume him as the surrounding mana begins to be converted into wind as Virion's body becomes cloaked in darkness. a feature of Virion's true strength. In the blink of an eye, Virion's single step transports him into Arthur's blind spot, a power Arthur could have never imagined Virion was hiding, and is something that forces Arthur to surrender. As Virion unsheathes his stealth, he reveals that his beast will Shadow Panther allows him to move as fast as the wind whilst neutralizing sound, a feature of advanced sorcery. Virion admits that such a technique is quite tiring, but having had enough fun, Virion hands Arthur a sword, stating that they'll slowly have to work up to more advanced techniques. With 4 days passing, Arthur begins to get used to his new powers, even managing to match Virion's shadow form. But most importantly, Arthur spends his remaining time alongside Tesha herself. Moving forward in time, the town seems to be holding a celebration, but when we follow Arthur, he seems to be apologizing to Tesha for angering her. During the festival, Arthur bumps into Faerith, barely remembering him as the elven boy he beat in a duel, but as their reunion ends with Faerith losing once more to Arthur, Arthur offers to be friends with Faerith. Surprisingly, Faerith shyly accepts, only to reveal that he'll be attending the gathering between the three kingdoms. Arthur wonders if Tesha herself will be going, but Faerith states that the fragile Tesha shouldn't be forced to attend, annoying Tesha as she pummels Faerith as well. Fleeing the scene, Arthur scolds Tesha for flipping out, but Tesha says she is just sad she won't be at the ceremony when Arthur leaves. As Tesha runs off, we cut to later that night, where she is all alone, but out of nowhere, several fireflies enter her room. Revealed to be Arthur's doing, Arthur asks Tesha if she would like to join him for a nightly stroll through the woods, exciting Tesha. Revisiting the memories of when they first met, our duo run into the magic beast they freed, only to set up a campfire under the starry night sky. Arthur notices Tesha slowly drifting asleep, choosing to tease Tesha as she is still afraid of ghosts. Chatting, Arthur says he's never visited the human kingdom before, hearing Tesha ask Arthur why he doesn't just stay in the elven kingdom with her. But before he can reply, Tesha falls asleep. With the big day arriving, Arthur gathers his gear, only to be greeted by the townsfolk for a final goodbye. Virion starts by handing Arthur a compass, an item with the Aerolith family seal, to help Arthur if he ever wants to return. Arthur asks where Tesha is, but it seems no one knows, prompting Arthur along with Faerith and his two friends to join Arthur as they prepare to step through the portal. Right on cue, Tesha is seen crying out to Arthur, rushing towards him only to trip. As Arthur dashes to Tesha's side, Tesha stutters over her words, but Arthur simply pulls Tesha in for a hug, stating that he'll miss her as they both begin to cry. As the chosen kids head through the portal, they appear in the floating city of Xyrus, where Arthur soon departs from Faerith and the others, making his way back to his parents' home. Having been dreaming of the moment for the past few years, Arthur knocks on his parents' home, only to be greeted by Eleanor. But not long after, both Reynold and Alice rush to greet their visitor, something that makes Arthur teary-eyed as he is finally reunited with his parents. Completely speechless, both Reynold and Alice are in disbelief, rushing to embrace Arthur only for Eleanor to ask who the boy in front of her is. Arthur remembers that Alice was pregnant when they were attacked, slowly kneeling down only to introduce himself as Eleanor's big brother. Heading inside, Alice asks about Arthur's mysterious illness, glad to hear Arthur's as things cleared up. Seeing Eleanor off to the side, Alice calls for Eleanor to chat with Arthur, but surprisingly Sylvie leaps into Eleanor's arms. Arthur decides to go over his entire journey from when he was separated from the Twin Horn Party, but chooses to leave out his encounter with Sylvia, instead uttering that he was lucky to have survived his fall only to run into Tesha. Arthur's parents are amazed Arthur was allowed to stay in the Elenoir Kingdom and had trained to stabilize his core there, but Arthur does feel bad for lying to his parents, reasoning he should get stronger before he tells them the entire truth. Reynold asks to know what the small pet Arthur is carrying around, hearing that Arthur had stumbled onto it during his journey and is a mana beast he had tamed. Reynold and Alice are just relieved Arthur made it back in one piece, but Reynold gets curious at how strong Arthur has gotten, revealing that Reynold himself had gotten a job at the Helsty auction house and is the instructor for their security team. Arthur wonders what level Reynold's mana core is at, hearing that Reynold reached deep orange 2 years ago. Apparently, mana cores ascend in colors based on their strengths, starting from black, red, orange, and yellow being the lower levels, while silver and white being the higher ones. Each color has 3 stages, these being deep, standard, and light. And seeing as Arthur is light red, he is actually very close to Reynold's deep orange. Reynold is a little annoyed that his son is almost surpassing him, suddenly scolded by Alice when Reynold asks Arthur to spar him. But out of nowhere, Vincent Helstia barges into the room asking to see if Reynold's son is alive. Reynold introduces Vincent as his boss and the owner of the auction house, prompting Arthur to greet Vincent and his wife Tabitha, surprising the duo as they see Arthur is well-mannered. Vincent chooses to introduce his daughter Lilia to Arthur, but upon seeing Sylvie's adorable form, Lilia breaks out of her shy shell and asks to pet Sylvie. Reynold says Vincent and his family arrived just in time, uttering that Arthur and himself will be sparring, all heading outside only for the boys to begin stretching. Vincent asks Alice if Arthur's mana core is truly light red, but Alice confirms that Arthur had always been a fast learner. But as the adults chat, Eleanor and Lilia play with Sylvie. Arthur knows that even prodigies around 11 and 12 years old that enter Xyrus Academy struggle to reach a deep red core. So Arthur reasons he should keep his progress moving forward more tame to avoid any unwanted attention. As the boys' duel starts, both Reynold and Arthur match each other's speed, exchanging punches and kicks, but Reynold mocks Arthur's punches. Arthur chooses to leap into the air, throwing out an aerial kick only to speed up his attacks, but Reynold is still able to read and counter each strike. Reynold admits that Arthur has definitely grown since they've last fought, but choosing to get serious, Reynold infuses his fist with fire magic. Arthur remembers that sorcerers can feel out which magic element suits them the best before ever engaging in combat. But augmenters like Reynold take much longer to master an element, and it's normally their fighting experience that reigns supreme in battle. With Reynold now rushing Arthur, Arthur is reminded of the key systems similar to mana in his previous life, all whilst barely able to evade Reynold's advances. Seeing his father's powerful strikes draw the attention of the onlookers, Arthur reasons that he should at least match his father's strength, suddenly imbuing his fist with magic of his own that captivates the viewers. As both boys rush each other, both Arthur and Reynold's punches cancel each other out, but Reynold reacts quicker, managing to sneak in a kick that blows Arthur back. Arthur refuses to be defeated just yet, realizing that Ki is just like this world's augmenters, suddenly remembering his training with Virion, where Arthur is offered the chance to proceed beyond normal fire magic. In the present, Arthur unleashes bursts of lightning, a technique Reynold recognizes as advanced fire magic, something that shreds the surrounding area. To make things worse, Arthur directs his attention to a nearby water fountain, monstrously conjuring the water to chase after Reynold. Luckily, Arthur chooses to halt the water just before it smashes into Reynold, gaining huge praise from Reynold as he's proud his son is so gifted. Vincent and Tabitha are amazed such a child exists, all whilst Lilia can't help but admire Arthur. That evening, Alice and Reynold tell stories about Arthur's antics after being born, but Reynold seems exhausted, collapsing out of his chair. Vincent asks if Arthur will be enrolling in Xyrus Academy, but Reynold says such a prestigious academy won't be affordable for them. Vincent and Tabitha offer to cover Arthur's tuition, but Alice fears that Arthur entering the academy at 8 years old may be too much for him. Vincent says he'll put in a good word, seeing as he has connections with Xyrus Academy's director. But Arthur butts in reminding everyone he hasn't seen his family in ages, plus he needs time to cool down after the sparring match. As Arthur wanders through the mansion, he accidentally gets lost, only for Lilia to call out to him, offering to show him around. Taken to meet the butlers and maids of the manor, only to be scolded by Maria, since Arthur's duel had burned up the lawn Maria was in charge of. Arthur watches as Lilia calls for more duck, but although Maria serves Lilia more food, she reminds Lilia she is gaining weight. The other maids whisper to Arthur that Lilia visits them and stress eats when her parents talk about her future, especially since they want Lilia to awaken as a sorcerer, even though Vincent and Tabitha aren't sorcerers themselves. That night, Alice and Reynold remind Arthur that they're glad to see Arthur has returned to them. But before they leave Arthur to rest, Alice demands a good night kiss from her baby boy. The next morning, Arthur rushes downstairs to greet the Twin Horn party, immediately receiving a tight hug from Angela, who is relieved to see Arthur is safe. Arthur also asks if Durden has gotten bigger, greeting Adam and Helen, who both notice how big Arthur has gotten. Surprisingly, Jasmine is seen inspecting Arthur's body, swiftly embracing him as she apologizes for not doing more to protect him. As everyone sits down, the Twin Horn members reveal that they had come back from the Atistan city, having been paid handsomely for the various jobs they took on their journey. Seeing such a rowdy crowd, Arthur realizes he doesn't actually know much about the Dicathan continent nor the Sapin kingdom, wondering if he should become an adventurer to learn more about the world. But at the same time, we see Lilia sitting all by herself, seemingly deep in thought. In his room, Arthur tries suspending an object in space, but only after a few seconds, Arthur collapses, completely exhausted from using this new power. Arthur says he needs to get stronger, but upon seeing Sylvie, Arthur cuddles with her, reasoning he should also spend time with his family as well. Seeing as Sylvie reeks, Arthur personally cleans her with a bath, only to be reminded of Lilia's stressful life, as her parents want her to awaken as a sorcerer no matter what. Wiping and cleaning off Sylvie, Arthur is glad for a job well done, but suddenly the girls of the household barge into his room, declaring that Arthur will need some new clothes. Immediately heading into town, Arthur is handed over to a stylist that gets to work tidying up Arthur's hair, all whilst picking out a better fit for Arthur. Returning to the girls, Arthur dazzles everyone with his handsome features, inspiring Tabitha to ask Arthur to visit the Helsty auction house, and since there are mainly nobles attending, Arthur needed to look the part to fit in. The girls also reason that they should show Arthur around Xyrus City, prompting Eleanor to ask to hold Arthur's hands. But Lilia teases the siblings for being so cute. Arthur hears that Lilia helped pick out his outfit, all heading through town as they explore various markets and spend time together. As Arthur participates in a little ring toss game on one of the city's statues, he is suddenly mocked by several students that attend Xyrus Academy. Lilia utters that Xyrus Academy students are held in very high regard, something Arthur will have to keep in mind moving forward, but out of nowhere Arthur senses something familiar. Arthur chooses to peep into a store that sells beast cores, magic drops extracted from mana beasts, and can be used to amplify a wielder's powers. Arthur wonders why he never heard of such a thing from the elves, but Tabitha says that beast cores can also contain beast wills, ultimately valuing them around 100 gold coins, enough money for Arthur to live for 250 years in his hometown. Seeing Arthur so curious, Tabitha says since some cores will be on sale in their next auction, she'll allow Arthur to browse around. Lilia suddenly asks if she can have a beast core, but Tabitha says having a beast core won't guarantee to awaken her sorcery and will only be a waste of money, intriguing Arthur. As the gang stop for some snacks, Arthur wonders what is pressuring Lilia to become a sorcerer, seeing as Tabitha doesn't seem to be trying everything to have her awaken. Before Arthur could ask if Vincent is pressuring Lilia, Lilia is seen heading into a nearby alley, forcing Arthur to tail her as she is seen heading into a weapons store. Inside, Lilia is seen browsing some cheaper mana cores, wondering if they would help with her awakening, but Arthur suddenly speaks up, reminding Lilia that there is no guarantee. Lilia declares that she's tried everything she possibly can, crying that a genius like Arthur has no idea what she's going through. But when Arthur tries calming Lilia down, she acts sporadically, accidentally bumping into some other kids. Revealed to be Xyrus Academy students, the boys immediately demand an apology from Lilia. But when the shop clerk checks on the commotion, they immediately flee the scene upon seeing the Xyrus Academy uniform. Seeing as no one is coming to save them, Arthur wonders what he should do, but upon seeing one of the boys prepping a fire spell, Arthur prepares to deal with the boys. Luckily, Tabitha arrives, ordering everyone to freeze. Tabitha reveals herself along with Lilia to belong to the Helstia family. The family everyone knows runs the auction house and has a big stake in Xyrus Academy, and this finally convinces the boys to flee the scene. That evening, Vincent is horrified to hear that Lilia nearly got into a fight with some Xyrus Academy students. But Vincent says this incident won't affect Arthur's future enrollment in the academy. Hearing this, Lilia asks if her parents will be sending Arthur to the academy in place of her. But before Vincent can correct Lilia, Lilia lashes out at everyone, crying that she hates them all. That night, Arthur tries speaking to Lilia, but it seems she has shut herself away. As Arthur speaks with one of the mansion's butlers, we flash back to a younger Lilia, where she hears from Vincent that the greatest achievement someone can have is attending Xyrus Academy. Ever since then, Lilia had dreamed of attending the academy, but sadly her sorcery never awakened, and she began to grow more spiteful of her own shortcomings, eventually blaming Arthur himself for her failures. In the present, Lilia awakens in the staff waiting area, only to notice Arthur is here to check on her, and seeing as she was wrong to lash out on everyone, Lilia takes the chance to apologize for her own shortcomings. Arthur recognizes Lilia's despair as the cold feeling that encompassed him in his previous life. But seeing as he's changed, Arthur heads over to Lilia, lifting her head up only to praise her for how hard she's been trying. Arthur shows off a spell Tesha taught him, managing to lighten up the mood, and reassures Lilia that her parents only want what is best for her and that the pressure she places on herself is unnecessary. Giggling, Lilia admits that Arthur is right, but she still feels bad seeing as her parents donate quite a lot of money to Xyrus Academy in preparation for when she becomes a sorcerer. Arthur knows that Lilia's issue will ultimately grow into something bigger if her sorcery is not awakened. So as we cut to later that day, Arthur reveals to everyone that Lilia has left their home to do some special training. Lilia's parents immediately demand an explanation, but Arthur reassures everyone that she is in good hands, handing Vincent a letter left behind by Lilia. The letter says that Lilia plans to train and return as a sorcerer as to not burden her parents any longer. But this only makes Vincent tear up, declaring that being a sorcerer isn't the only thing one has to grow into, and that Vincent and Tabitha will accept Lilia regardless of her career choice. At that moment, Arthur calls for Lilia to show herself, revealing that he needed to show Lilia that her parents care for her no matter what. Vincent recognizes he was wrong to instill the dream of being a sorcerer in Lilia. Plus, Vincent and Tabitha agree it should be Arthur's decision to attend Xyrus Academy if he likes, apologizing to Reynold and Alice. Seeing her parents so accepting of her, Lilia declares she'll still go to the academy and make them proud when she awakens, all embracing each other as they utter how proud of each other they are. Off to the side, Arthur gets an idea, stating that he can help awaken Lilia's mana core. Asked to sit alongside Eleanor, Arthur first asks Lilia and Eleanor to begin to breathe, hoping that the girls will be able to pick up on any mana flowing through them. Skeptical at first, Lilia and Eleanor follow Arthur's instructions, both beginning to control their breathing only to close their eyes to heighten their senses. Eleanor mentions how she saw a light, but it disappeared since she disrupted her breathing. With both girls breathing like he wants them, Arthur says he'll help speed up their growth, suddenly injecting some mana into them, only for Lilia to mention how pretty the lights are when she has her eyes closed. With the family all amazed at Arthur's teachings, we cut to later that night where the maids and butlers all celebrate Lilia's awakening. But Arthur reminds Lilia that it'll still take 2 to 3 years for Lilia to fully stabilize as a sorcerer. Regardless, we see Lilia grateful for Arthur's help, but as we cut elsewhere, we see a hooded figure amongst some knights escorting a carriage, all heading to the auction house. Not too long after, we see our gang arriving at the Helstia auction house as well, frightening Arthur and his family as they are amazed at the massive, prestigious building before them. Seeing as Reynold and Vincent will be working, everyone else heads inside, all spotting various aristocrats and adventurers scattered throughout the building. Arthur wonders what types of items will be sold tonight, all having a look around at the displayed items, but off to the side, Arthur can't help but admire his father for looking so cool, especially when he gives orders to his men to stay alert. As the guests fill up the main room, we see Vincent introducing the main guest of honor for tonight, revealed to be King Blaine Glader, Queen Priscilla, Prince Curtis, and Princess Kathleen. With introductions out of the way, Vincent kicks off the 10th anniversary for his auction house, reminding Arthur of his previous life. As various guards along with the Twin Horn party survey the area, Vincent starts off by displaying a sword with electricity enchantment applied to it that is capable of paralyzing its foes. Instantly, the crowd begin bidding on the sword, with it being sold for around 50 gold. But next up, some interesting masks are wheeled onto the stage, intriguing Arthur. Looking around, Arthur wonders where Sylvie is, and since Eleanor and Lilia are fast asleep, Arthur reasons he should go search for her. Following Sylvie, we see her wandering around other sections of the building, coincidentally bumping into a hooded-looking man. Back with Vincent, he moves on to auctioning up a world lion, a creature capable of growing into an A-rank mana beast, and seeing as Curtis wants to tame such a powerful monster, King Blaine instantly ends the bid by offering up 1,000 gold coins. With Blaine and his family appearing on stage to collect the lion, Blaine declares that Curtis will be in charge of taking care of the creature moving forward, all whilst the hooded man seems intrigued by Sylvie's presence. Luckily, Arthur calls out to her, piquing Arthur's interest as he wonders if the hooded man is a conjurer serving the king directly. Sylvie takes the chance to flee to the safety of Arthur's shoulders, but the man suddenly realizes something. Before Arthur can leave, the hooded man demands that Sylvie become his, offering to draw out Sylvie's full potential. But when Sylvie refuses, the man fires off a fire spell to intimidate Arthur. Arthur demands to know who the man is, learning that the man works for the king, but Arthur could care less, turning to leave. The man reminds Arthur that his family will be punished if Arthur disobeys members of the royal family. But finally snapping, Arthur glares at the man, beginning to overflow with aura. All across the auction room, Arthur's bloodlust shatters various windows and even ends up suffocating Vincent and several others in the crowd. But before the king can issue any orders to uncover the cause of such bloodlust, Arthur quickly calms himself, realizing the man before him has fallen onto the floor out of fear. As the auction is put on hold, Blaine asks to speak with Reynold, who apologizes for being unable to track down the person that exuded such an aura. But seeing as Arthur and the others are present as well, Sebastian, the hooded man from earlier, tries nabbing Sylvie again, this time in the presence of the royal family. Seeing as Sebastian has worked for years protecting the royal family, Blaine instantly asks Reynold if his son could hand over Sylvie to Sebastian, but Reynold says it's Arthur's decision to make. Sadly, Arthur says he could never hand over his beloved Sylvie, pissing off the knights guarding the king. The king stubbornly offers to trade the lion he just purchased for Sylvie, but Arthur still refuses, asking the king himself if he would willingly trade away his children. Arthur declares that the king's pride is clouding his reasoning, but this prompts two of the king's knights to rush Arthur. But in an instant, Arthur knocks out the attacking knights. Seeing as he wants Sylvie at all cost, Sebastian unleashes a devastating fire spell at Arthur. But having had enough, Arthur makes use of his new technique. Having frozen time for everyone but himself and Sebastian, Arthur slowly approaches Sebastian, letting out his rage by breaking Sebastian's leg. When Sebastian tries to call out for help, he is horrified to see no one respond to him, allowing Arthur to kneel down beside Sebastian, warning him to stay in line and not anger him in the future. As Arthur unfreezes time, Arthur suddenly collapses out of fatigue, but as we cut to the next morning, Arthur awakens, annoyed at himself for going a bit overboard. Surprisingly, Alice appears with Sylvie, revealing that after Arthur collapsed, they were all free to go. Apologizing for worrying everyone, Arthur and Alice head into town, only for Arthur to pick out a gift for Eleanor. Arthur wonders if Reynold lost his job because of him, but Arthur is surprised that Alice herself works, and she mainly sells products that are quite popular amongst nobles. Having racked up a lot of groceries, Arthur helps Alice carry the items home, only to notice people listening in on a conversation between Reynold and Vincent regarding last night. Arthur chooses to enter the room himself, immediately greeted by an apology from Vincent, who offers up some money for last night. Arthur realizes that Vincent is covering for him and making Arthur look like the victim, framing it as two knights attacking an innocent boy, but Reynold is still annoyed that the two knights were only fired without more severe consequences. Arthur reassures Reynold that it's fine. Plus, Arthur is more curious about what happened to Sebastian, learning that he was relieved of his position as well. Apparently, Sebastian had accused Arthur of attacking and breaking his leg, but since no one saw such a thing, it was decided that one of Sebastian's own spells deflected and injured himself. Vincent reminds Arthur that he should be more careful when speaking to royalty and that Arthur was lucky he was let off so easily, something that Arthur acknowledges. But Arthur is still grateful to have been given a decent amount of money for his troubles. That night, Arthur says since he is still a child, he'll need to become someone great to rival and sway people. The next day, Arthur heads over to the academy, noticing various Xyrus Academy students chatting. But a particular owl catches Arthur's attention, a creature that guides Arthur into a nearby forest only to reveal themselves as Xyrus Academy's headmaster.